The Knights of St. John assembled in solemn chapter to discuss Prince James' requisition, and it was finally resolved that it was consonant with the dignity and policy of the order to receive the Ottoman prince. Accordingly, on the 23rd of July 1482, Jem, with 30 attendants, landed at Rhodos and entered on a long period of captivity most discreditable to the Christian potentates, by whom he was nominally protected, but who in reality made him the subject of barter and sale, of long imprisonment, and ultimately of treacherous murder. He was received at Rhodos by the Grand Master and his knights with ostentatious pomp and every resemblance of hospitable generosity, but it was soon thought desirable to remove him from Rhodos to one of the commanderies which the order possessed in France. It was considered by d'Aubusson and his comrades that by removing the Ottoman prince from their island, they would be better able to evade the demands which Sultan Bayezid was sure to make for the surrender of his brother to him, and that there would be less risk of losing their prisoner by assassination before Jem left Rhodos. D'Aubusson took the precaution of obtaining his signature to a treaty by which Jem bound himself, in the event of his ever becoming Sultan, to conditions highly favorable to the order. D'Aubusson, whose skill as an unscrupulous diplomatist was at least equal to his gallantry as a soldier, which we have had occasion to admire while tracing the times of Mohammed II, next sent an embassy to the reigning Sultan in order to secure all possible advantages from having the pretender in the power of the knights. It was agreed that there should be peace and free trade between the order and the Porte, and that the Sultan should pay a yearly sum of 45,000 ducats ostensibly for the maintenance of his brother, but in reality as the price of his compulsory detention in some of possessions of the knights. Before Jem had thrown himself into the hands of the Christians, Bayezid had offered him the revenues of the province which he had formerly governed, on condition of his living quietly at Jerusalem. Jem refused this offer and demanded the cession of certain provinces to him in full sovereignty. Bayezid replied that empire is a bride whose favors cannot be shared. On James persisting in his resolution to seek through Christian help the means of renewing the Civil War. Bayezid endeavored unremittingly to compass his death, or at least to purchase his imprisonment. The high-spirited but unhappy prince, whose adventures and political talents have made him a favorite character in Frankish as well as Turkish history, was landed by a galley of the knights at Nice in November 1482. Jem expressed his gratification with the beautiful scenery of the Frankish city, but was urged to commence his journey to Hungary, whence he designed to pass into Romania. His conductors informed him that as he was on French territory, he ought not to depart without the formal permission of the king of the country. Jem accordingly sent one of his suite to Paris, and was assured by the chevaliers that his messenger might easily travel thither, and return in 12 days, but care was taken to arrest the Turkish envoy on the road, and Jem lingered for many months at Nice, closely watched, so treated with apparent respect, and in vain expectation of a messenger from the French court. At last the plague broke out in the city, which gave the knights a plausible excuse for conveying their prisoner to a commandery in the interior of the kingdom. The greater number of the Ottoman prince's native followers were now forcibly removed from him, and Jem was confined first at Roussillon, then at Pai, and afterwards at Sassenage, where he inspired their fair Philippine Helena, the daughter of the lord of the castle, with an ardent passion, which was not unreturned, and love for a time lightened the weary hour of the captive prince. At last the knights took Prince Jem to a tower which they had caused to be built expressly for his safe custody. It was 7 stories high. The kitchen were on the first story, the chamber of the domestics on the second and third. The fourth and fifth were for the apartments of the prince and his jailers. The knights themselves occupied the 2 highest. For 7 years the Ottoman prince was detained in France. The remonstrances against such treatment, which he addressed to the knights and to the Christian princes and chiefs by whom he was visited, and his repeated attempts to escape, were fruitless. Thus he was an object of interest to all Christendom, and many kings negotiated with the Grand Master Diocletian for the purpose of obtaining possession of the claimant to the Ottoman throne. Diocletian purposely protected the discussion of terms, and was unwilling to put an end to the custody, which, although little creditable, was eminently lucrative to the knights at St. John. James's family, consisting to his mother, his wife, and his infant children, were at Cairo. The Abushon had the unknightly craft to obtain 20,000 ducats from the wife and mother of his victim under pretense that the prince was immediately to be set at liberty, and that the money was necessary for the expenses of his voyage. This was in addition to the 45,000 ducats which Sultan Bayezid paid annually as the price of his brother's captivity. At last Charles VIII of France interposed, not to set Prince James free, but to transfer him from the hands of the Knights of Rhodos to the custody of the Pope. A guard of 50 French knights was appointed to attend the Turkish prince, and it was agreed that in the event of the Pope giving him up to any other Christian sovereign without leave from the French court, a sum of 10,000 ducats should be paid as forfeit money to Charles. The court of Rome undertook to indemnify the Knights of Rhodos, and a variety of privileges were accordingly granted to them by the sovereign pontiff, and Theobald himself received the honor of being made a cardinal. In 1489, Prince James made his entry into Rome, with the empty pageantry of honors like those amid which he had 8 years previously been conducted into Rhodes. He was lodged in the Vatican and formally presented to Pope Innocent VIII by the Grand Prior of Auvergne and the Ambassador of France. It was in vain that the chamberlains and other papal officers urged on James the necessity of paying the accustomed homage to the spiritual head of the Church and temporal sovereign of Rome. The son of Mohammed the Conqueror would neither veil the turban nor bend the knee, but walking straight up to the Pope, James saluted him as the cardinal do by a kiss on the shoulder. Then, in a few words, full of manly feeling and princely spirit, James asked the pontiff's protection and requested a private interview. It was granted, and James then narrated the hopes, the ferret, the sights, and the hardships which he had undergone during the captivity. He spoke of the cruelty of his separation from his mother, his wife, and his children, and of his earnest desire to behold them again on the sail to Egypt for that purpose. The tears flowed fast down the cheeks on the unhappy Turkish prince, while he told his wrongs, and even the Pope was moved and wept as he listened. But Innocent said that for James to sail for Egypt was incompatible with his project for winning his father's throne. that the king of Hungary required his presence on the frontiers of that kingdom, and that above all he ought to think seriously of embracing the Christian faith. James replied that such an act of apostasy would irretrievably ruin him in the opinion of the fellow countrymen, and he promptly stated that he would not be false to his religion for the sake of the Ottoman Empire, or for the sake of the empire of the world. Innocent did not press the work of conversion further, and closed the interview with hollow words of consolation and encouragement. At this time, there happened to be at Rome an ambassador from the Sultan of Egypt, and soon afterwards there arrived an ambassador from Sultan Bayezid. The Egyptian ambassador sought out Prince Jem and prostrated himself before him as before the lawful sovereign of Turkey. Jem learned from him that the Rhodesian Grandmaster had extorted the 20,000 ducats for Jem's mother and sister under the false pretense of their being required for the voyage from France. Jem and the Egyptian envoy complained loudly at the papal court against the Rhodian knights for this fraud, and demanded restitution of the money. The Pope and Sultan Bayezid's ambassador interceded in favor of the knights, and by their means the order was discharged from the debt for 5,000 ducats, paid down immediately. The ambassador from the Turkish court was charged with the ostensible mission of presenting to the Pope certain holy relics of the crucifixion, but he was also commissioned to arrange the price for which Innocent VIII would pledge himself to keep Jem within the Papal States. 40,000 ducats a year was the sum agreed on between the rulers of Rome and Constantinople for this purpose, and Jem was accordingly detained at the court of Innocent for 3 years, and on the deed of that pontiff the Turkish prince was safely guarded in the Vatican until the successor to Innocent was selected. The new pope was the infamous Alexander Borgia. He forthwith sent an ambassador to Bayezid, and bargained for the continuation of the payment of the 40,000 ducats for continuing the detention of Jem. But Borgia also stipulated that he was to have the option of receiving 300,000 ducats paid down at once, if he took the shortest and most effectual means of securing Jem from invading Turkey by putting him to death. Borgia is said to have been the only pope that sent an ambassador to an Ottoman sultan. His envoy was George Bocciardo, his master of the ceremonies. Bayezid was pleased with the ambassador and thought so much of the assurances which were conveyed to him of the Pope's high esteem and friendly regard for him, that he requested the Pope as a personal favor to himself to make Boccardia cardinal, while the Sultan and the Pope's ambassador at Constantinople were trafficking for gems, bondage, and blood. Charles VIII invaded Italy and on the last day of 1495 entered Rome. Pope Alexander sought refuge in the castle of St. Angelo, taking gem with him as one of the most valuable of the papal treasures. 11 days after the entry of the French army, there was an interview between Pope Alexander and King Charles for the purpose of arranging a treaty of peace. One of the chief conditions was the transfer of Prince Jem into Charles' hands. A meeting of the Pope, the King of Jem, subsequently took place in which the Pope gave Jem for the first time the title of Prince, and asked him if he was willing to follow the King of France, who desired his presence. Jem answered with dignity, "I am not treated as a prince but as a prisoner, and it matters little whether the king takes me with him, or whether I remain here in captivity." Jem was transferred to the French king, who entrusted him to his grand marshal. He accompanied the French army from Rome to Naples, and witnessed the slaughters of Monte Fortino and Monte San Giovanni. The Pope had now given up all chance of making any profit by the custody of Jem, but there yet remained the still more lucrative venture of pursuing his assassination. This was accordingly done, though the Italian and Turkish historians differ as to the mode in which Borgia effected the crime. According to the first, Jem was poisoned by a bribed attendant, who mixed in the sugar, of which the Turkish prince ordinarily partook, some of the white powder, by means of which the Pope was wont to rid himself of obnoxious or overwealthy cardinals, and with which he at last accidentally poisoned himself. According to the oriental writers, James Barber, a Greek renegade named Mustafa, inoculated his master with deadly venom by slightly wounding him with a poisoned razor. Van Hammer in his notes says that about the middle of the last century a Dalmatian monk relied on this precedent of Mohammedan interest with the Holy See and begged the then reigning Sultan to aid him in obtaining a cardinal's hat. But in order to save the officers to the Porte the trouble of sending a formal letter of recommendation, he framed himself a laconic note, which he addressed in duplicate to both the Sultan and the Pope. It was as follows: Most Holy Father, the poor friar, they add they add Mustafa thought it was for the sake of the Pope's money that he did the deed, acquired favors afterwards which with Bayezid for this service, and was raised by degrees to the dignity and Grand Vizier. All agree that Jem was murdered by the Pope and that he died by a slowly wasting poison. A letter which his mother had written from Egypt reached Naples before his death, but the unhappy prince was too weak to be able to read it. His last prayer was, "Oh my God, if the enemies of the true faith are to make use of me to further their destructive project against the flowers of Islam, let me not outlive this day, but take at once my soul unto thyself." Jem died in the 36th year of his age after 13 years of captivity. Sultan Bayezid sent a formal embassy to reclaim his remains from Christendom, and Prince Jem was buried with royal pomp at Brussels. Sultan Bayezid, though victorious in civil war, gained little glory in the encounters of the Ottoman power with foreign enemies during his reign.